All right, good evening, everybody. For the second time, I'm Jeff Colson. I'm with Junior Hockey Advisor. I'm rebroadcasting right away because we had a little technical glitch in a couple of ways on the last video we just did. So I took that down. If you watch that first one and you don't want to watch this again, I will make just DM me if you want a copy of this, or you can watch this later, I guess, too. So tonight's topic, we're going to talk about Tier 3 junior hockey teams, their finances, what their income is, what their expenses are, a little bit about their infrastructure, of how they're structured, and we're going to make a little bit more sense of these things because a lot of people don't have a real good understanding of how these teams work. So let's jump right in. Let's pull up our screen here, and I'm going to do it right this time. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to make sure that it's up and running. There we go. This time we're going to have success. This time we're going to see it the way it's supposed to be seen. All right, there we go. Breaking down Tier 3 junior hockey teams. And once again, Jeff from Junior Hockey Advisor. If you're watching this, please tell me where you're from. I saw we had Hungary on there. We had Canada up there. I think it was Montreal. If not, I knew it was over in the Quebec area. I know that Colorado was in and they're watching too. So we got a lot of people on there, even for a late Saturday night. Even if you're watching this as a rebroadcast and you're not watching it live, take the time to share it with somebody. Take the time to let me know where you're from and that you're watching this content. Let me know if you like the content. That's extremely important. Is this something that actually makes you want to come back for more, makes you want to see a little bit more information about what we're doing? So I'll give you a little bit of plug about Junior Hockey Advisor a little bit later, but let's get rolling. Let's get into what I want to talk about. So is it a money grab? That's a big question everybody talks about with Tier 3 hockey. Tier 3 hockey is a money grab. It's there as a money grab. Oh, the owners, they just make a lot of money. They steal money from the kids. You know, it's a money grab across the board. Now, I can't say for a fact, I have no proof that there aren't programs out there that are purely money grabs, where there's, just tons of cash being brought in, and it's not in a reasonable fashion. I can't answer that question, but I can tell you from my experience in the 4 different leagues I've participated in as a coach, a GM, and as an owner: EJHL, Empire Hockey League, USPHL, Elite, ESPL, PHL, Premier. Now that was Premier before there was NCDC, so when Premier was the top. Premier used to be the NCDC. I'm not sure about the name change. It's not my business to figure that out. So disclaimer, finances vary wildly from team to team and league to league. In fact, team income and expenses can be drastically different when comparing 2 teams in the same league. So please utilize the following information as an example of a fictional team. So, take it in context. Take it that I put an example together. This is not necessarily done to a science. I didn't go out and poll 50 teams. This is off experience. This is off of having a lot of knowledge of the ownership groups that are out there right now, and a lot of people that I talk to that are still either owners, general managers, or coaches. So a little bit about Tier 3 hockey. In most markets, Tier 3 hockey franchises are staffed with very few paid personnel and run on extremely tight budgets. Most Midwest and East Coast teams have a fan base below 200 people. That's right. The first thing you got to remember is it's very difficult to get a fan in the door, and I'll talk about in a second. Because Tier 3 hockey is tuition-based, there is a delicate balancing act between tuition cost and services rendered. In other words, how much you charge the player versus what the player's experience is like, how much ice time, how many games, and what their travel experience is, and what other services you're offering them as far as off-ice conditioning, educational services, things like that. So, there is a model to follow. Teams that are located the furthest away from the league epicenter are at a large disadvantage to the other teams because it drives up their travel costs and the time spent on the road. So, for example, on that epicenter thing, in the East Coast, most of the teams in the Tier 3 level, where do they center around? Boston. So if they center around the Boston area, if you're a Boston-based team, your travel is extremely low for the year compared to the Syracuses, to the Rochesters, to somebody up in Maine, somebody that's down in the Washington, D.C. market, Rhode Island, wherever the teams are at. They don't have the same cost involved because in many situations, the team is so close that you're playing the away games. You have the players just drive over there because Sometimes it's easier and closer for them to get from the billet house to the opposing team than it is to get to their own games or own practices. So, a team like Syracuse or Rochester that half of the season is in a bus and a half of the season is in a hotel room, the costs go up because they're further away. And it doesn't matter which division of the USPHL you're in, that's the situation. So we're going to introduce the financials. We're going to do a breakdown of the income and expenses, and then we're going to summarize the Tier 3 operations. We talked about that fan base, and that's the cause of the low fan base is pretty easy. Fan bases are low for one reason only, and that reason is because players, teams are playing in markets that have way too many teams actually vying for that disposable dollar. A family in Rochester, New York has Toronto 2.5 hours away, NHL team. Buffalo just over an hour away, depending on what side of town you live. It could be 45 minutes away if you're on the east or the west side of town. You have an AHL team right in the middle of town. You have an RIT that's 4 minutes out of town, 5 minutes out of town. Then you have Brockport, Geneseo, Hobart, Nazareth. You have 4 teams that are D3 and good competitive D3 teams in the same market too. In fact, the junior team usually shares, or had for years, shared the rink with one of the D3 teams. So you're in a situation that if you've got that much competition, of course people are going to go watch a D1 team. Of course they're going to go watch the AHL team. They might not get down to watching a junior team play, especially a Tier 3 junior team. So you end up with family, friends, and girlfriends. So that's what shows up. And the occasional coach that comes to watch you, or scout that comes to watch you too. So I bring this up because it doesn't matter if it's Boston. It doesn't matter if it's Detroit doesn't have as much Tier 3 junior hockey as some of the other markets, but Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, Utica, you get into any of the Boston cities that have teams, they're all in the same boat. They're all in a situation where it's extremely hard to draw a fan base, even at the Tier 2 level, a level up, which is extremely good hockey, and it's a big jump as far as the talent goes. But there's only a few teams on the East Coast that actually draw fans in a game. A program that just moved but has been around for a while is Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Wilkes-Barre, when they went to the North American Hockey League, they didn't gain fans. They've got a nice rink. They had a very competent team. There's nothing wrong with anything they're doing, but sometimes the away team brought more fans than the home team did. But then you get there's anomalies. The program up in Maine is an anomaly because they've got a decent crowd that's put up there around what they've been doing. Johnstown is very similar to other semi-pro cities that lost their semi-pro team, and the North American Hockey League came in and took over the facilities and turned it into a North American Hockey League town. So Johnstown, PA gets a phenomenal crowd. However, Jamestown does not get a large crowd. You get into New Jersey, the Titans and the Generals, they don't draw either. Not to any near the extent of what some of the teams out west do. So anything on the east is very difficult to get a crowd to. There's anomalies at the Tier 2 level. Tier 3, you're once again 100, 200 people in the crowd. You're feeling pretty good about that. So let's get back over to the actual slideshow. And I think that should be up for you now. All right, so we already talked about the fan base and what's going on there. So let's move on to some income. So if you've got 28 players at $10,000 per player, and once again, these are made up numbers that are roughly in the range of, it could be a little plus or minus depending on where your program's at. Of course, if you're watching in Canada, you're looking at that $10,000 and going, "Hey," because their programs are in the $4,000 to $6,000 Canadian, which is perfectly fine, just different markets. That's why we talk about this. But if you have 28 players at $10,000 per player, there's $280,000 coming in the door. If you get 100 paid attendees average across the board for all 30 of your home games, you can draw in some money along with the money you charge for your showcase and main camps. Now, that showcase and main camp is extremely important to a Tier 3 team. If you don't have that, you don't have that revenue stream right there. And you'll see in a second how important that revenue stream is to make things happen here. And usually, the number is roughly $250 to $350 per showcase. And some of the leagues actually are mandated to participate in the spring and summer. I know the USPHL, you're mandated to put a team in the spring and the summer. Sometimes you're mandated, depending on how many, U16, U18, and how many junior teams you're running, you might be mandated to put 2 teams in each of these. I only did this as putting 2 teams in, or 1 team in each of the 2 summer showcases, and having a main camp with 6 teams there. Now, some people could pull off an 8-team showcase. I think at the tier 3 level, it's extremely hard to pull off an 8-team showcase. I think you see more teams at tier 3 running 4 and 6 teams in their showcase. So a different way to look at this is looking at it from the expense side. So the 2 main expenses, if you break it down into two parts, are your ice cost and your league fee and your showcase fee. So your game and practice ice, if you get 150 practice hours. Now, some people, 150 is not enough. If at $200 an hour, we tried to work it somewhere between 150 and 190 every year. We always try to pick up other hours, but I was also running 2 or 3 hours of private lesson ice a day. So we would bleed over. We'd take a half an hour from the private lesson ice and just run the team an extra half an hour on that ice too. 30 games at home, $350 per hour. Different markets, that could be high or low. League fee, once again, that's a generic league fee. It's not tied to any one league, but let's just say it's at $20,000. Then your salary and travel, if you put these numbers together and look at this, that salary includes your coach, your assistant coach, whatever scouts you might be paying, your EMT that's required for home games, your trainer, if you pay a trainer, and then your travel includes your hotel, your charter bus, and your meals on the road. So if you add all that up, there's already $238 or $280,000 out the window. But that's nowhere near all the costs. That's just taking your 2 main costs, your ice and your travel and salary. That's where everything's at. That's the majority of your money. Keep in mind that ice time, travel, staff salaries typically can run as high as 80% of a team's budget. Here's a little bit of breakdown of a budget in a little bit more detail. If your ice is 74.5, travel is 99,000. It sounds high, but remember, you get 2 days of a charter bus on the road. You could be paying $1,800 a day for that bus. You might get a deal. You might get some that you can run for $1,000 a day on the road. Then you've got your league and professional fees. Don't forget, you've got to pay for everybody that's around the kids to have their background checks done. Your coaching certification programs, or most programs reimburse their coaches. So anybody that's trying to move up from a level 4 to a level 5, from a level 3 to a level 4, you're picking up all those fees. That can be $300 or $400 a pop. Salaries, once again, we talked about that. Now remember, that's not much money. That's $65,000 to cover 2, 3, 4, 5, and your whatever legal and accounting. There's $65,000 budgeted to cover a lot of different things. Now, in most years, legal and accounting is, $1,000 to $2,000 a year, because you only have to have your legal department overlook your contracts, just to review them to make sure all your contracts look good. And that accounting is just your typical once a year accounting. But, sometimes there's a bunch of different things being negotiated when you get into the new rink contracts and new ice contracts, or your league decides to move or change their name or do something. All of a sudden your legal fees can skyrocket. You can't really do much about the EMT and the trainer and coaches. Now, a coach's salary can be anywhere from, at the tier 3 level, there are coaches out there that work as volunteers. They love it that much. They're usually assistant coaches that are, they've got another career and they just want to be around the team. But for the most part, you're paying a head coach anywhere from, 15 to 18,000 to 35. Now, with that said, there have been coaches in the tier 3 level that have been in the 200,000 plus range for their team. I'll go into that in a little detail after I clear this off. Let me get these done. Number 5, the cell phones, insurance, health insurance, office and locker room rental. Some rinks require you to pay separately for any office space you use, or to pay for the locker rooms that you use. Some of them will throw their locker room in and throw a locker room and an office in because you buy so much ice, but not all do. But there's another $31,000. So then you got helmets, gloves, pucks, socks, sharpening wheels for your skate sharpening machine, warm-ups for the kids, shorts, shirts, staff equipment, easily 13, sometimes up to 20, 25,000, depending on what you're buying. Now, you're not necessarily replacing helmets every year. You're not necessarily replacing sharpening wheels every weekend. Warm-ups, the kids usually keep. Socks, there's usually, the way socks are made these days, it's usually repairing them once or twice during the season is good, but by the end of the year, you've got a very high attrition rate on your socks. And remember, you are dealing with teenage boys. There are times where things will just disappear, and you have to take care of any pilferage as far as replacing it for the next year. Then number 7 down at the bottom, that's the playoff contingency. Now, that's $7,000 a week, especially if you're on the road. That sounds high, but remember, if you're going to practice 5 to 7 hours, you're looking at $1,200 there, maybe because it's spring, you get it a little bit cheaper. But then you're also still looking at that same bus cost, same hotel cost, same food on the road cost. And if you're home, you still got to pay for two games when a team comes into town to play you. So at the most, you want to have a contingency fund set up to at least cover the 2 or 3 away weekends, especially if you're in the lower part and you just barely made the playoffs. Having 1 or 2 weeks of contingency money is always a good idea. You don't want to run yourself so thin that you can't cover playoffs. I have been there when we were first starting out in the junior business. We made the playoffs, and we literally went through the playoffs on a credit card because we were too naive to know how much money it was going to cost us. And I have an MBA in finance, and I still really didn't get it. I could argue that I still don't know what the heck I'm doing. 70% of your money is ice, salaries, and travel. 30% of your money is everything else. I built this budget here at pretty much a break even to a little bit of a loss, depending on how you look at it as far as that playoff contingency. But you can look at this here just to get a wheel, because sometimes you get a better sense of it. How ice costs, travel, and salary and league fees just eat up all your money. And this is at charging $10,000 a player, which is not uncommon. That number in some markets could be $11,000, $12,000, $13,000, or $14,000. And sometimes they hide the fees a little bit. Sometimes they'll go at $8,500, but then they'll a la carte some of the travel expenses, or they'll a la carte the gym membership that you have to have, or they'll a la carte the your apparel. Whereas, okay, it's $8,500, but then your apparel package is going to cost you $600, and then your gym membership is going to cost you $600. And so there's different ways that teams do this. That's another way of hiding some of the expenses. If you're looking at tier 3 teams, that's definitely a question to ask. Is that fee they're charging you? Is that an all-inclusive fee? Does it cover my meals on the road? Does it cover my gym? Does it cover all of my apparel that I'll need? Now, kids might want to buy an extra hoodie or an extra beanie. They might actually want a team jacket, things like that might not be part of the apparel package. Those are usually for sale, so you might have a couple $100 that you can optionally buy that you don't need. So key employees. Remember, tier 3 is different. If we were looking at a tier 1 team, and you can go pull one up, 2 of the good programs to pull up. Go pull up the Dubuque program. Pull up Dubuque in the USHL, and just look at how they're staffed. They've got a head coach. They've got a separate GM. They've got an assistant coach. They've got a goalie coach. They've got a video coordinator. They've got an education coordinator. And all these are paid positions within their organization. Then they've got a front office staff. They've got a director of ticket sales. They've got a director of marketing. They've got a office manager. All these positions are full-time positions. So you could have a staff. You've got game day operations people. You've got play-by-play announcers. You've got video coaches. That's tier 1. Okay. You see that in BCHL. You see that in some of the AJ teams, not all the AJ teams, but your upper echelon AJ teams. And you see that in the North American Hockey League with a lot of teams. Now, don't get me wrong. There's North American Hockey League teams that their ice staff is just the coach and the assistant coach and maybe a volunteer assistant goalie coach. where they run 3 and they might have a couple volunteer scouts. So just because you're in the North American Hockey League doesn't mean you've got huge budgets. So the titles here, you see a head coach GM, okay? In a tier 3 team, it's not uncommon to see head coach and GM put together. You'll see it at higher levels too, but it's very common to see it at the tier 3 level. You might see that GM title on an assistant coach once in a while. If it's a long-term assistant coach that's been around and is just a steady guy that likes his job, likes doing it, he might be an assistant coach GM. Or you'll see an assistant coach get elevated to an associate head coach GM. And then the owner tag. Now, that owner tag could be GM too, but let's just talk a little bit about what the head coach does in this situation. If you're head coach and GM, you've got on ice and off ice practice planning responsibilities. You're directly involved in recruiting and player advancement. So not only are you looking for new players, you're talking to coaches and colleges to try to get the players advanced to the next level. And you're coordinating the use of the local gym or your gym. You're a jack of all trades. Assistant coach is coordinating the unpaid staff. He's getting all the game day staff together, or the scouts that are volunteer scouts together. He's working with, helping coordinate the on-ice practice plan and game plans. He's watching video, using his time to do video with the players. It's a very busy, especially at the tier 3 level, where most of the time that assistant coach is a part-time guy. Very rarely are you seeing 2 full-time guys at the tier 3 level. And now that owner could be, let's just talk about what he does in this scenario. He coordinates the team travel, the bus, the hotels, collects dues from the players, handles all team payables and receivables, ensures that the players are eligible via USA Hockey. You only get to keep so many guys protected. You have to move them. If you get 2 guys in the stands that you want in the game, Friday they are in the stands, and Saturday night you want them in the game, you've got to drop 2 players off your active roster. You've got to add them and delete the other guys off the roster. It's got to be approved in state hockey. That's what the owner would do in this scenario. He schedules all the ice time, attends all the league meetings, negotiates with the rink for ice and room rentals and whatever else for the rink needs to negotiate, and manages all of the game day stuff, ticket sales, collecting all the money from the money box when ticket sales are done, any kind of 50-50 drafts or raffles, anything else that you're doing. If you're doing a jersey giveaway, if you're doing things on the ice between periods, all that stuff the owner would do in this situation. Now, the owner could be the head coach. The owner could be head coach and GM. There are a couple T3 teams out there right now where the owner is the head coach, GM, and owner, and he's got an assistant coach too. This is very much a small budget, small staff way of going about business. So, and you can see by the money involved why. It's the other key volunteers in a T3 team. These are things that are usually paid for with the higher level teams, is bill a coordinator. The billeting situation to have players stay with a volunteer family, you have to have one person coordinate it all that has the ability to communicate with those families, communicate with those players, make it all work, and also to recruit and foster new relationships with new players coming in. Your scouts, they work directly with the coaching staff to ensure complete and thorough coverage of the respective markets. You might have a Michigan scout, you might have a West Coast scout, you might have a Toronto scout, you might have a Boston scout. Every team has a different amount of scouts. There is no rhyme or reason to how scouting works at the tier 3 level. I know we paid 2 different scouts a very small monthly salary to be in the rinks and watching players, and then we compensated them for how many players made our team. We did not compensate them for showing up to our showcases or mate camp, but we did give them a bonus if they recommended a player to us that actually made our team. And then game day staff. Another volunteer role is ticket takers, selling tickets, security, goal judges, penalty box workers, time clock, score sheet. Sometimes even the play-by-play at the tier 3 level as a volunteer or very minimally paid position. So you can see there's a lot of work to be done that, tier 3 organizations rely on volunteers to work with. Now, some teams pay these people. Some people have found a way to do it. And especially if you don't have as high of a travel budget, or if you don't have as high of an ice cost, there is more money to pay these people instead of having volunteer positions. So It's up to you on if you think this is a money grab or not. I think what I showed you was a break-even scenario, maybe a little bit of a loss in money. Clearly, in the scenario, in the example I gave you, it was a team that was out of the epicenter, and being away from the epicenter meant a lot of travel. Which, if you're in Florida, if you're in North Carolina, and if you're in the Michigan market and the Midwest market, if you're in the West, the travel budgets could be even worse than what I showed in this example, and the ice cost could be too. I don't know what ice cost is in Arizona right now. I don't know what it is in Utah, and honestly, I don't even know what the ice cost is in Florida right now. But I can imagine in some of those places it's going to be higher than the numbers I showed you, and some of them it's going to be lower. So you make the call. It's a hard way to make a living. I don't know of many tier 3 owners or ownership groups that make a ton of money at this. Mostly a labor of love. The way you make money on this is A, if you own the rink, or B, you get involved in multiple things. You're running a 16 team, you're running an 18 team, you're running a lower level junior team, even a tier 3, and then a higher level tier 3 team. That definitely helps. We had an academy. We actually ran an academy that was very similar to. I'm going to throw my picture back up here. So we had a similar situation to what TPH has, Total Package Hockey. We had an online classroom set up. We had a full-time teacher that taught in the classroom and helped us. And we also had private lessons. We'd teach 30, 40, 50 private lessons. We had 2 skills rooms where we could keep private lessons going all the way till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, which made a big difference. And then we did a lot of little tournament teams with little kids and summer camps, and all that put together kept us viable as a overall company. We would literally run 15, 20, 25 tournament teams where we take them up and play in the AA and the A and the house level tournaments up in the Toronto market and the Vermont market, or something exotic like Lake Placid, which is a very fun trip for young kids and they enjoy them. But you got to find other revenue streams. You can't just keep relying on tuition. But with that said, you say, well, geez, those numbers don't really work out. Why would anybody be in this for break even? Well, that's a decision a program has to make. There are programs on the East Coast that are tier 3 or even in the NCDC system where they realize that they're not going to make money with their team. But that team is so important to their overall youth organization, or it's so important to the rink for identity purposes and for marketing and other things, that they use the team as a loss leader. I hate that phrase. I hate that way of looking at it. But it is true. There are teams that do that. There are other teams that, like I said, there's synergy. When you put together 3 or 4 teams and you can package things together, it drives down your jersey cost. It even drives down your practice cost, because you can sometimes bleed ice together between 2 organizations or 2 of your teams, especially at 16 and 18. There are times where we would cancel an 18 practice for the day and we'd split the 18s up and put them on the ice with half of. Remember, 18 teams are usually only 17, 18, 19 players, sometimes 20 players. You don't have 25 or 30 with U18. So we'd take and put 10 and 10 on with the junior guys, the guys that were the advanced guys. At 18s, we'd let them skate with the other team. So we found different ways to cut costs here and there, and also make it profitable. So you don't want to raise that tuition up any more than you have to, but you can see in that example, you probably in this case would want to raise that tuition up maybe $500 or $1,000 just to make it so that you weren't so tight, that there was actually a little bit of a profit margin there. But if you think that there's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars that are just laying around for that owner to run away and take his little money bags like the Monopoly guy and run down the street, it doesn't happen. I haven't ran across it yet. Like I said, it could be out there somewhere, but yeah, I've yet to experience that. I can tell you it was the 15 years that I was involved in juniorship GM positions and ownership positions were some of the hardest financial years I've ever been involved, because we literally had to pump harder in everything else to keep the junior programs afloat, because we just absolutely did not want to be the high end of the tuition. Remember, when you're outside of that epicenter, it drives your cost up. But if you put yourself too far up, nobody will want to play for you at all, because you've priced yourself out of that league's market. So you want to keep yourself at least competitive with with the epicenter prices, and the teams are all centered in the Boston market or wherever your epicenter is for your league. So I hope this helped. If you liked what we were talking about, please let me know. Let me know that this was good. If you really liked it, share it with a person or two. Let people know what's going on. Our industry professional program, this is part of the industry professional program. If you're looking to become a coach, a paid coach, if you're looking to get into scouting, if you're looking to get into any part of the junior hockey world, college world, and you're looking to move into a professional role, this is the kind of stuff we'll get into in a lot of detail. This is a taste of what we do. So, please DM me if you have any industry. We have a industry professional coach program. If you want to get into that program, we've got a class running right now. Our next class starts in July. We're going to keep the classes small because I interact a lot with the class either through live broadcasts or through phone calls. So if you're interested, please let us know. I'll get you. We'll get a phone call. We'll get talking to each other and see if it's something I can help you with. Besides that, have a great night. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're watching this on replay, feel free to still tell me where you're calling or watching from. Feel free still to share it with it and still share the comments with me so that I can actually know if there's something I can help you with as far as answering other questions about this. Please don't argue about the math. I did not do this to say this is exactly what your tier 3 team pays. Coaches, I think you understand, GMs, owners, this was not put out there to ruffle feathers, and that's why I did not pick on any one certain team or use any certain model from any certain area. This was generic. This was built just to show you that it's a lot tighter than what people think. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Get back to me giving some feedback. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.